When Trump was running for president, he talked a lot about China. He talked about how the Chinese government totally ripped America off for years.
We're going to get our businesses back. China has taken from us so much money, so many jobs. China has rebuilt itself with what they've taken out of the United States. Okay, they've rebuilt themselves. I call it the greatest theft in the history of the world.
After Trump won the presidential elections, he picked Elaine Chao as his transportation secretary. Now, in my mind, everything that Donald Trump said when he was running for president about China was wiped out the moment that he picked Elaine Chao as transportation secretary. And I'm going to show you why. You see, Elaine Chao is married to Senator Mitch McConnell. Senator Mitch McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader. That gives him say on what's voted on in the Senate. Elaine Chao is the Transportation Secretary. Elaine Chao's father has a large shipping company, and that shipping company ships from China to America to everywhere in between. Now, the first red flag would be, of course, that Elaine Chao is the transportation secretary and her father is in transportation, which is a huge red flag for me, especially when it goes back and forth to China. The next red flag, of course, is that in 2014, Elaine Chao's father's shipping company, which I would argue she has a vested interest in, was found in Colombia with 90 pounds of cocaine on it. 90 pounds of cocaine. The transportation secretary's father's shipping vessel, which she has a vested interest in, was caught 3 years ago with 90 pounds of cocaine on it. Do you see a problem there? I certainly do. But amazingly enough, she skated right through the Senate with a 93-6 vote count. And yet another red flag is the family history of the Chaos. I'm going to translate this and let's see what we can learn. According to this article, James Chao, Elaine Chao's father, after graduating Shanghai Jiao Tong University in China, he then ended up moving to Taiwan. And in 1951, he married Elaine Chao's mother. Elaine Chao was born in Taiwan in 1953, and her father, James Chao, worked in a shipyard, and he became the youngest captain of the shipyard. Now, his boss's shipyard, which was owned by the former Hong Kong Special Administrative Region Chief Executive's father, thought that James Chao was very talented. So talented, in fact, that he ended up sending James Chao to America to study. Can you imagine someone paying your way to another country and then pay for your schooling there? Amazing, isn't it? So after studying and going to the United States, it didn't take James Chao long, because between the United States government and, of course, the UN, they contracted James Chao's shipping company numerous times. And within 10 years, James Chao's shipping company became one of America's leading shipping companies. Now, when you add that fact with the small little fact of in 2014 that there was 90 pounds of cocaine found on James Chao's vessel, the Ping Mei, you may start to think that the United States government, along with the UN, may have been using James Chao all along to distribute drugs. I certainly tend to think that way. How about you? Elaine Chao's father also has ties to a former Chinese president, and they run deep. The two were classmates at Shanghai Jiao Tong University in China. The former president was also the former General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. He was also president to the People's Republic of China from 1993 to 2003. So let's get back to Elaine Chao's dad. He is a very, very generous man. Mitch McConnell's personal wealth went from $3 million to, in 2007, more than $7 million. thanks to Elaine Chao's dad. And there's more to learn about Elaine Chao and her family, but that'll come later on down the line as we learn about their massive connections. Now we'll go to the Hannity program where he interviewed Elaine Chao right after the joint session in Congress that was held on February 28th.
To launch our national rebuilding, I will be asking Congress to approve legislation that produces a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure of the United States, financed through both public and private capital, creating millions of new jobs.
And here now with reaction is the Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao. Can you explain the public-private capital and how that's going to work?
So public-private partnerships are a very important part of financing, of a new way of financing our roads and bridges that are in disrepair and are very dangerous. Sure.
Explain how that works, though.
Yeah, I will. So basically, we allow different kinds of money, private sector money, to come into the United States. I'm not saying foreign, to come and fund, let's say, a bridge or a road, or it can be any kind of infrastructure. By the way, I should also add that the president's initiative on infrastructure will include probably energy, water, broadband. So it's not just roads and bridges, but it's to build the whole infrastructure that will make our country more competitive going forward. So public-private partnership allows private sector money to come into the economy and fund public works. So far, right now, there are so many impediments to allowing private sector monies to come in. And we should do away with all those impediments. Yes.
Well, so maybe, if I'm hearing you properly, maybe what you're saying is that, for example, if a company were to rebuild a road, they might get their investment back by, say, having a toll on that road, and this way the taxpayers don't pay a penny, they make a profit, it's a win-win, something like that?
Yes, thank you for putting it that way.
When I first saw this interview, I was sure that there would be tons of articles about this. But to my surprise, the only thing that I saw on this was about paying a toll to a foreign country. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's much more than that. It's about a global spying apparatus that's being put together under the guise of public-private partnership. To start with, Trump is doing exactly as he's told by the Council on Foreign Relations because Policy Memorandum number 44, Infrastructure Finance in America, How We Get Smarter, that was released in March of 2014. The United States has an infrastructure investment problem. A generation of roads, bridges, airports, and water and sewer pipes built a half-century ago is nearing the end of its useful life, yet traditional public resources are no longer substantial enough to foot the bill. Investors from the United States and around the world are eager to invest in infrastructure projects that can provide stable, long-term returns through public-private partnerships. I'm thinking that Chairman Chao, which just happens to be a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, speaks with a forked tongue. And, by the way, China would just love to revamp U.S. infrastructure.
For foreign investors, including CIC, the election result brings about opportunities. Trump calls for expansionary fiscal policy and more investments in US infrastructure. The upgrades and the expansion means massive investment. The US government doesn't have all the money. Private investors in the US don't have all the money. And this is where the foreign investors come in.
You see, under the guise of public-private partnership, the globe is going to be united into a utopic structure that the globalists have always longed for. The plan is to connect the world through infrastructure, and this is from April 28th, 2016. Now, this article is basically a report on a book that was written called Connectography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization. and it was written by a man named Parag Khanna. This book, from what I can see, is basically a new and improved and actually updated version of Sun Tzu's Art of War. Let me give you an example. Speaking in terms of the author, this article says he asked us to revamp the world in terms of its connections rather than its borders. Connective infrastructure trumps separatist nationalism. The economics of supply lines moves into the foreground as politics and ideology fade into the background. So if each nation's infrastructure was all connected together with the energy, water, and broadband, which is mainly everything we need to survive, and then each nation's connections were connected together, well, gee, you would have a system of control that is unmatched, wouldn't you? Let's continue with Parag Khanna. Well, here he starts talking about Hegel and the Hegelian dialectic, and he says that the devolution aggregation is how the world comes together by falling apart. Aggregation is the next phase of history beyond political division. Every region in the world is proceeding through this accordion of fragmentation and unification. Ah, the old Hegelian dialectic, order out of chaos. Parag Khanna makes it sound much more sophisticated, though. And that is cause so much chaos that the people are begging for relief and wanting more rules. And also the chaos provides plenty of cover to hide what you're doing underneath. And we'll go up to page 3. Despite the World Bank's legacy of financing post-war construction in the 1960s, it shifted its aid focus away from infrastructure, leaving basic irrigation, transportation, and electrification systems underdeveloped. China has stepped in as a new and symbiotic partner. China is therefore not buying the world per se, but building it in exchange for natural resources. Looks like China is going to be in charge of building this giant spying apparatus. So let's pick up right where we left off with the Chinese Investment Corporation interview.
Over the past 3 decades, China's infrastructure has been growing very fast. It's one of the biggest successes China has achieved. We have lots of design, execution, and management experiences that we can export.
So let's see how the People's Republic of China, which just so happens to still celebrate communism for some reason, has perfected the art of the spy grid.
China's government is building what it calls a social credit system. The system will use data to track, and then punish or reward, the behavior of individuals and organizations. But it will work something like this. Using data from government departments, financial institutions, and the internet, the system will create credit records that track individual behavior and assign a rating to each citizen. Do something bad, like fall behind on your bills, break traffic rules, or spread unapproved information online, and your credit rating falls. Do something good, like volunteer to pick up trash in a park, and your rating goes up. If your rating dips too low, it could make it harder for you to take out a loan, travel abroad, even get your kid into a desirable school. Some critics say the system is an Orwellian effort to track and control people, one that turns big data into Big Brother. Pilot projects are being run in different parts of China. In Hangzhou, authorities have threatened credit penalties for things like cheating on subway fares, littering, and lighting up in non-smoking areas. In Shanghai, adults who don't visit their parents often enough could see their ratings dip. And in the northwestern region of Ningxia, officials say the credit system will be used to punish people who have more children than legally permitted.
Now let's see how this system is implemented. Through grid management, a supervisor is responsible for every minute facet of life for 200 families in the country. All families and individuals living in such an area are grouped together as a grid, crisscrossed by comprehensive CCTV coverage. The grid manager networks with police, neighborhood party committees, and all key social agencies to maintain 24-hour-a-day scrutiny of their charges, who occupy that zone. Every internet service provider in China is required already to provide the authorities, if asked, with the true details of the name and Chinese identity card or foreign passport number of every person who posts any message via any social media with anyone's use of the internet susceptible to monitoring if needed. Now let's have a look at some laws that are being put in place and have already been put in place to get this monstrosity of a global spying grid together. The Senate passes a bill allowing internet service providers to sell your internet history to the highest bidder, and that's from March 23, 2017. Amid a slew of other major news concerning healthcare, the Supreme Court, and President Trump, senators in Congress quietly voted and passed a bill which allows American internet service providers to sell customer internet history to the highest bidder. The bill was confirmed along party lines in a 50-48 vote, and while internet privacy advocates are deeply disappointed at the vote, the reality is that the vote was mostly a symbolic middle finger to consumer privacy rather than a major step forward in privacy invasion. The bill, which allows ISPs to sell the data they have to corporations, is much more minimal than already established laws handing that same power to corporations and the government. The reality is that ISPs really don't have that much information on their users. The data they collect is not as specific as some may worry. And the process to obtain more detailed information, like which websites their users visit, is a difficult one. Basically, this law allows ISPs to sell far less detailed information than Google and Facebook are selling on you right now. Consumers have been having their information traded, bartered, and sold online for years now. Private corporations like Google and Facebook have long had the ability to sell their users' data to advertisers, while the NSA is able to scoop up as much data as they'd like for investigations. Every time you Google something or like a page on Facebook, you are handing advertisers more information about yourself. The most obvious example of this, after searching for a pair of tennis shoes on Google, those same shoes show up on your Facebook ad, targeted just for you. It's a clear sign that nothing we do online is truly private. This goes right into public-private partnership, folks. Because who is going to be coming in and taking this over? Well, of course, either a foreign country or a commercial entity. And those same rules do not apply to commercial entities. And folks, this is global. Let's see if there's any more impediments that have been overcome to allow this monstrosity to come in here and spy on the globe. We'll go back to the globalist favorite author, Parag Khanna, who is today's Sun Tzu. He says here, China has stepped in as a new symbiotic partner. China is therefore not buying the world per se, but building it in exchange for natural resources. Has there been a bill passed recently that would allow China to get natural resources without us knowing about it? Why, yes, there most certainly has. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 2017, House Joint Resolution 41, which is disapproving the Securities and Exchange Commission's rule on disclosure of payments by resource extraction issuers. So while China is building the enormous spying apparatus here in America, our government will pay them back by them scooping up all of our natural resources. And we will not be the wiser because we will not be able to find out who is extracting the resources because of HJ 41. Remember when Hillary Clinton sold 20% of the uranium to Russia? Well, folks, if this rule were in place back when Hillary sold the uranium to Russia, we would never know that it was Russia who was getting the uranium. And that brings us, folks, to Jade Helm and InfraGard, in which we will talk about in part 2 along with some more connections. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see part 2.